ready to go. Thank you for joining us in the Conservative Home Tent here at Party Conference. Fantastic to see so many of you to hear about this important subject. I have found out that I am a user of open banking through my Monzo account, and I'm sure in many other ways. So I'll be interested to hear how open banking is helping people and what services it includes. So there is no essay question as such for this panel. Open banking, the catalyst for a UK digital economy. But I guess I can ask, is it a catalyst for the UK digital economy? In what ways? And how is it benefiting consumers, businesses, and the wider economy generally? I'll introduce my panel. We have Paul Scully MP, who is the Minister for Tech and Digital Economy at the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. We also have Marion King, who is the Chair and Trustee of Open Banking Limited. She was appointed in February, so quite a new role. Your priorities are to maintain and protect the CMA order and work with key stakeholders to promote the adoption and growth of open banking. And Stephen Wright, who is the Head of Regulation and Standards, Bank of APIs at the NatWest Group. Fantastic. And Francesco Simoneschi, CEO and co-founder of True Layer. He's a technologist and serial entrepreneur, and he came here from San Francisco.
Yes.
Fantastic. And set up his business. I'm Emily Carver. I'm a columnist at Conservative Home, and you may have seen me on GB News and other TV stations, channels. Right, so let's get into it. Should we start with you, Paul? You're the Minister for Tech and Digital Economy. What is open banking and why is it fantastic?
Well, let me answer the first one, the second question first. It is fantastic because it's the most amazing opportunity. It already is an amazing opportunity that companies like TrueLayer and others are taking advantage of. And I was going to say 7 million, but it's 7.75 million users of open banking are using. Sorry, I've stolen your thunder, haven't I? There are so many people using it.
She wanted to say that.
And the nice thing about for those of you, and the fact that you've only just found out you're using it, Emily, is because it's seamless. Actually, there is no reason. We were discussing it earlier on. That the fact is that you were saying, do we need to be shouting about it to the customers? No, we don't, because it's seamless in the same way you use Google. I've just come from an AI debate, and when we talk, what is AI? Google Maps, Apple Maps, that's AI. So you already use these things without really actually knowing that the technology behind it. You don't need to know. But we have 162 unicorns in this country. We've created 162, got about 144. The other 20 have either exited or moved on to other countries. And a lot of them is no accident. A lot of them are to do with payments and fintechs, because it's those opportunities and the incremental transactions that you can benefit from that really create so many opportunities. There's 11.4 million open banking payments made in July 2023. That's up 102% year on year. So you can see how this is really proliferating as there are more opportunities to use open banking, with 1 billion successful API calls every month. So that's when the data is being accessed via the app, and it's making a call to that core, the core ledger, as it were. And the great thing about this is that UK is really, literally world-beating. I know you all come to conferences and we're all saying we're world-beating and that. This is properly world-beating. We're the first country to move to this depth, but we can't rest on our laurels, because one of the issues is we had to legislate to make the banks open up their data. We've got a long legacy of banking, and so they were slightly reluctant because they obviously have their own security, their own trust and values that they've built up. So to give some of that away, in inverted commas, obviously they were slightly reluctant to do it. But we, showed and proved that the open banking is safe.
When did that legislation go through? Sorry.
Oh, that was
very recent.
No. This is a few years ago now. This is way before my time. So this is
way
before my time. And so, we had to show that this is safe, and this is transparent. This is good for business. It's good for consumers. And so we have hundreds of third-party providers that are taking that structure, that body, and really opening up those services to us. We want to go further, though. We want to move on from open banking to open finance. And again, earlier on, we were talking about open energy and open everything. What more can we do to share that data in a really easy to access sort of way? And there's a recent report that shows an opportunity, an ecosystem for businesses for about £4.4 billion. But what I'm saying, we can't rest on our laurels. Because we've got that legacy of banking, we had to move through that. Not every country has that legacy. So usually you often have an advantage of being a first adopter. And we do, because we can set the standards. However, other countries where they are late adopters, because they can just hop over us. I think one really good example was India, where they have their MOSIP, their India stack that they have, which is they built a technological framework there, and that's allowed them to move from just about 12 years ago, when only 8% of Indians had a bank account. Within that short space of time, 80% of Indians now have a bank account. And now you might think that's nothing special if you're looking at the cities like Mumbai and Delhi and the rest. This is the entire country. So that's all those rural villages around, around that massive country. So they do have the ability to jump very quickly. And again, we were talking about Brazil and their work. So we've got to move on, and we've got the data bill that's already going through through Parliament at the moment, and it's going to carry over after the King's speech. But we're in a hurry to get that done, because what that will help us do, as well as help us create a government digital identity, that is not, and I repeat, not anything to do with ID cards. It's just something that we already have a footprint. We all know we have a footprint of government, whether it's driving license, passports, those kind of things. It just, again, is a way to have an API that other identity providers like Yoti and those sort of organisations can dip into and say, yes, you are the person that we think you are. It's a trusted identity provider, essentially. And that means that it checks for employment, checks for housing and those kind of things. Instead of taking something like 28 days on paper-based, takes minutes, if not seconds. So that's going to be so beneficial to us as consumers. Ultimately, this is all about consumers.
Fantastic. Marion, your pitch.
What can I say? It's taken all my best ones. But so the date was 2017 when the order was put in place. So here we are 6 years later with growth, real growth, tangible growth, and just on that, it's now nearly 12 million transactions a month. So we're starting to see it grow. We're also seeing the momentum uptick, but we need to do a lot more. This is the beginning of a journey which is showing how open banking is transforming some of the use cases and some of the experiences of consumers and SMEs and government departments and big corporates. I think it's really telling that Apple have chosen the UK as their first application of open banking globally. So on your Apple wallet, you will now see your balance come up before you do that magical click to make the payment, and that's happening in the UK. And so we're talking about big tech engagement as well as consumers and SMEs, and I think that's really exciting. So expect to see those volumes grow. The more to do is really laid out by the JROC report, which was issued in April, which has 6 work streams against which we're all working very hard to deliver recommendations and the data that's required for JROC to make key decisions around the way forward. And those, are around data flows, they're around fraud data, they're around consumer protection, so that we can together put open banking and faster payments together and provide that sort of credible alternative to card payments to enhance competition in the UK. It's around levelling up. I don't mean north and south, I mean levelling up so that it's more than just 9 banks, it's all account holders, and that all participants in the market are engaged in the regulatory framework and in the scheme that needs to be developed for the efficient running of open banking for the future so that it's sustainable. Those work streams are all underway. They've all got tight deadlines, which all come to fruition around about the end of the year and early next year. So we'll see some exciting progression next year as well, Emily, as we see growth continue for the UK. Fantastic.
Thank you. Stephen, you have been leading market engagement and the delivery of regulatory requirements with respect to open banking at NatWest Group for 6 of the past years. So you know a lot about open banking, how it meets with regulation. Tell us, why should we be excited about open banking?
You should be excited about open banking because it literally does have the potential and the opportunity to create innovation propositions that really help the end consumer, the end small business. And if you look at some of the things that have been delivered in the market over the last 6 years, if you look on the consumer side and being able to pay your tax bill, pay your credit card far more easily than you could do in the past, top up your Monzo account far easier than getting out your credit card or debit card and going through security and everything else to do it. It is simplifying those experiences. If you're a small business, being able to import all your bank account data into your accounting platform really helps you become more efficient and actually kind of manage your business more effectively. The same as kind of helping people build credit files and kind of portable credit history makes the credit market work more smoothly and get access to affordable credit. So I think huge number of benefits and use cases, and this is just the beginning. If you go to open finance, more data, smart data, you can do more.
Fantastic, thank you. Francesco, you are a serial entrepreneur in the tech world. Tell us what open banking means to you, about your product as well.
Sure. Can you hear me? So let me share a little bit of my story. Like you introduced me saying I'm coming from San Francisco. Well, that was like a little bit of time ago. I'm a tech entrepreneur, and what I do, I build companies. That's my passion and end up in my career, right? And so yes, I lived in San Francisco, and I kind of witnessed in 2011, 2010, like this sort of explosion of the digital economy, right? And this is a region of the world that is famous for the innovation and access to capital, the best talent in the world, and everything coming together to bring some of the innovation that we use every day. We mentioned Apple, of course, like is coming from those nearbys, but many other companies, right? And so been there for several years, and at some point I was really interested into financial innovation and financial technology, right? As an entrepreneur, as an investor, and thinking about where is going to be the next wave of innovation. And I really stumbled upon the work that was done here in the UK and open banking as an industry concept. And it really is a simple concept. It means, right, all the different banks opening up a little bit of their access, creating some sort of like common platform, call it like digital infrastructure to allow third-party companies to create consumer proposition or business proposition to that extent, right? And so I thought that was incredibly innovative, first of a kind. And so I literally packed up my bag and like moved in 2016 in London and built TrueLayer from the ground up. And today we are a company that employs like a few hundreds of employees. We have offices in the UK, Ireland, in Italy, where I'm coming from originally. And most important, we really were on the forefront of the open banking movement, open banking adoption in the UK, and like it was 2018 where we were like I would say among the very first companies connecting for the first time to the bank and try to make something to happen, right? And so we went a very long way where I think we went through some of the numbers of open banking, but back then, 2018, it was zero, like exactly zero transaction. Now it's tens of millions of transactions. At times we are ourselves responsible of like north of 40% of the market share of this kind of like growing infrastructure. What we do, we imagine, okay, we can take this sort of new infrastructure and then imagine a payment network built on top of that in a way that could be competitive with some of the largest companies in the world. And some of those companies are very international, and they have, of course, like a kind of incumbent role in the economy. And so we believe that there are several different reasons, depending where you are, whether you are a consumer, whether you are an SMB, whether you are an enterprise company, whether you are a bank itself, right, for imagining this payment network to work in a slightly different way. A way that puts security, puts ease of use, but also like just reset a little bit of the economics that underpin payments, which are very hidden to the average consumers, but actually is a huge business that drives, again, some of the largest companies in the world. And so we thought back then, 7 years ago, that the UK was kind of the right place to build this sort of company, and I'm still really convinced that is kind of the case. And we saw how the UK was on the forefront of this innovation from a regulatory perspective, talent perspective, even capital perspective. We ourselves, we got investment like north of $200 million of dollars. So it's big investment, big money that entered this country, and we were able to deploy by employing people, critical talent that really helped us to get to where we are at the moment. So that means we have a good thing going, right? But also means that if we don't keep investing and developing, we will just like stop where we are at the moment, which is, I think we made it 0 to 1. Like we are at base camp, and now we need to push all the way to the summit, right? And so if we don't do that, if we don't bring it, like, for instance, to proper legislation, and we just don't find like a long-term home for whatever we are doing, then I think like many of those efforts will be a little bit vanished, right? Like we are just not going to be going the full extent that this innovation can go, and I believe like we are going to create incredibly positive outcomes for competition in the market that trickles down to consumers. That means, accessing all the different services in a way better way, and just like eventually either saving or get your more value from all the different digital services that we are using every day.
Can I just say, by the way?
Yeah, of course.
So you asked why it's so exciting, open banking. You might think it's because they've got amazing entrepreneurs like this, but actually it's because in the most middle-class line you're going to hear from me at this conference, I just paid my window cleaner, sat here. So that's just that instant payments and instant approach that you can do whilst I was listening. You can multitask, and that just enables your everyday life as well.
Well, there you go. Quick payments while you're supposed to be listening. Well, it is just so easy to do everything. I didn't know this was all, open banking, but it's obviously made my life easier. On that point, okay, so that's what you think is one of the most exciting services
Absolutely.
Available from open banking.
Rapturous.
Marion, what would you say? The best open banking enabled products, services for individuals, but also for SMEs, small businesses?
I think there are many, and it's quite difficult for me to pick out one or two, but I'll give just a couple of examples. I'm going to start with an area which I know you're covering later on, but it's around social good. It's around helping those more vulnerable. It's around helping those who hitherto have been, either have slim credit files or have been underbanked. And that's because access to data can enable a much fairer and equitable approach to, assessing credit, gathering data that isn't necessarily how long have you had a credit card and have you paid it off every time. And there's, different organisations that are doing different things that are helping individuals. So I just wanted to post that.
Sorry to interrupt you, but could that help with mortgages? Because it's often said that
course.
People who've been paying rent for years and
course.
years, they can afford a mortgage, but they're not allowed one because they don't pass some of the tests.
Exactly that, and assessing that credit, utilising different information, fairer information, current information and historical, to make it far fairer and easier for people to get a mortgage and get on that property ladder, which for all of us who've got young adults in our families will know what a challenge that can be. So that's a really good example as we move into mortgages. Other areas will be, and I think some have already been highlighted in terms of helping SMEs. I was at an SMA group outside of open banking, but in another area that I work in, and we got talking about open banking, and the CEO of an SME, he said, using, cloud accounting or embedded finance or whatever label you want to put on it, but enabling importing bank data into software packages for my business, he said it's like having an accountant and a financial advisor in my pocket every day for virtually free, which was a really great thing to say, and it had transformed the approach to managing cash flow, payables and receivables and managing the whole approach to the financial management of an SME, which is really important. So a number of good examples here. There are more to come, Emily. There are really powerful use cases as we move into variable payments, as we move into other areas, whereby the whole essence here is putting the control really in the consumer, in the SME, in the buy side of the market, not the supply side of the market. So this is really stimulating the opportunity for buy side of the market to control their finances far more effectively.
Fantastic. Stephen, do you have anything to add in terms of, fantastic open banking enabled products and services?
A couple of things, just to follow up on kind of Marion's point around mortgages. Mortgage is actually an example where government data would also help. Because if you're going to go and do proof of income, and 40% of the UK population are increasingly self-employed, etc., then tax data is a very quick way of proving your income. The same example when you start to look at cloud accounting. If you'd be able to bring in your company's house data, your tax data, etc., as well as your bank account data and your accountancy, then you're starting to make those businesses even more efficient in terms of some of their administration processes and building those credit files as well. And then Marion kind of mentioned variable recurring payments, which I think is the next big exciting thing for open banking, which is basically like a variable debit. So it's something that could be used to replace direct debits, standing orders, debit card transactions. But the difference really is that you as a consumer are in control. You know when the payments are going out, how much, etc. You have notifications. You can change what is happening. And that potentially, for vulnerable customers on direct debits, but also for replacing, when you're paying your Spotify subscription or you've signed up to something, you've forgotten about it and you feel you're out of control and it's going to your credit card, this is where this comes in.
Yes, because I've been trying to cancel a subscription for a while and I can't for the life of me do it. I think I've got to phone them up.
Yeah.
So would I be able to do that just through my app?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, Mail Plus.
Well, you'll also be able to do that when we get the digital markets bill through as well, because subscription traps is one of the areas that we're clamping down on as well. So if you've got exactly one of these subscriptions and you have to phone someone up to get them to tell you any number of reasons why you should stay and then give you a deal that they should have given you ages ago, that's what we're trying to outlaw. So you should make it a lot easier. But can I just also say, because we talked a lot about consumers, and it's absolutely right, you give you choice and control, better control, as we've heard. For SMEs, you talked about SMEs. I used to run small businesses, and I remember doing VAT returns about, 10, 15 years ago. Really took forever to do it. I'm not an accountant. I just want to crack on with my business. Now, I've used all of the various accounting packages like Sage, Intuit, and QuickBooks and Xero in my time. Because you're just logging your transactions as you do them, you press a button, it works out your VAT liability if you've got one, or your refund, and then you press another button, it connects to your bank account, and it does the job. That's that interoperability that open banking offers. So for business people, you can crack on and run your business. You're not having to try and learn about double entry bookkeeping.
Francesco, maybe a bit more of a difficult question for you. A lot of people, when they hear things about open banking, data sharing, alarm bells go off, privacy concerns, what's my data being used for, is this part of issues of privacy and safety, really, and what's the data being used for?
Yeah, and I think rightly so. Like privacy, security must be at the very center stage of the conversation. So I remember back in the days when the industry really and the banks, of course, designed the open banking standard. They just put security and privacy as the first problem to be solved, and so the regulators even they decided to basically create an industry-wide framework where there are appropriate technologies, but also a regulatory regime that really assign where is the liability. So making sure that all the actors where this data gets funneled to are responsible for the usage of this data, the way they store it, all the security measures that they build around. And so it's actually security by design, but also very clear allocation of responsibility to all the different actors that are taking on those sorts of liabilities. And we all know that data in the current economy is some sort of is the new oil, right? So I think it's really important that the data flows, right? That it's very important that there are no barriers and let's say reasons why the appropriate use of data should be incentivized, because it solves real problems. Like you were saying something about SMBs using transaction reconciliation to do VAT or whatever accounting, right? So this is an appropriate use of data, or sharing your bank data to to a lender to get a mortgage or some sort of personal loan. That is also something that we should allow, but in a privacy preserving and in a security in a high security standard kind of environment. And I believe we as an industry, we delivered on that. So knocking on wood, I just can't recall big security incidents since open banking has been going. And now it's several years. And I think all the companies involved, I can tell they all take this responsibility very, very seriously. And I would say so far so good. And this is applicable to the, I think we all use a lot of digital services, and there must be, I think, company responsibility to understand we are dealing with the most important information of our consumers and users. And so I think everybody in this environment and this ecosystem needs to step up to the game, right? And we take that very seriously. I know that the banks take that very seriously. It's always a balancing act between making sure that everything is extremely secure, and on the other side, removing barriers and friction, right? Also, we want that to be user-friendly. We want that to be extremely intuitive. We don't want to have a PhD to use some of this technology. We want that everyone really can participate into this source of innovation. So that's kind of the trade-off that sometimes you need to make. But I would say so far so good, and I really hope that with things like VRP, for instance, which is some sort of new development of open banking, we can make further strides into create something that is extremely secure, but also removes a lot of the friction that currently exists.
I guess, Marion, just one thing on that. I guess back in the day, you'd have one bank account, and if it got hacked, it would just be that one bank account. With all this sharing and interconnectivity between your different banks and all that, if you were hacked, could it be catastrophic?
I think the whole word open banking frightens people, because 1 minute we're talking about scammers and fraudsters, and then we're talking about open banking, and that sort of, well, does it open up the gateway to everything? It's probably not the right phrase to use. And the important thing to remember is, and Francisco touched on it, the reason we have strong security in the UK, because this is built on the industrial strength security of the banks. We are using the data and the security frameworks of banks, and that's where our legacy actually plays to an advantage. It's often a problem in terms of leapfrogging technology, but this plays to an advantage in the UK. On top of that, then, you have open banking, which runs a trust services, clue in the title here, trust services that monitor that trust to give high levels of assurance. Can you ever beat all the fraudsters? No. But it's a high level of assurance that's constantly monitored. We regularly convene the technical design authority to make sure it delivers what was said under the order in a consistent way. And we adopt the certification of players, onboarding, and the safe passage of data. Open banking don't see the data, but we make sure it's secure. So I think we can rest assured in the UK that there's strength in trust and assurance and security, and it doesn't mean, open banking doesn't mean you're opening the gateway to all your bank accounts and all your information.
Stephen, do you have anything to add on the question of privacy, safety?
Yeah, a couple of things. It's also transparency in there, so you actually know in open banking where your data is being shared and where your data is. I would imagine that most of the people in this room use Google search. Google makes about 4 billion a year out of all your data. Facebook also makes a large sum of money in the hundreds of millions. You have no idea where your data is going and what your search data is and what they're profiling about you. In open banking, you have that control and you have that visibility. And I think that's really important. And the other thing as well is that Marion's organisation's role in this and the regulators is that we have to conform to these standards. This is tested. This is not just, here are some standards, just follow them, and we'll just let you get on with it. No, every year we have to attest to the standards and security. So with that kind of check built in.
Paul, what does this mean for we'll come to some questions from the floor in just one moment, but just on this, excuse me, we're in desperate need of economic growth. Sorry, in this country, lots of stagnant growth. So, will this contribute massively? Have we got some figures on how much open banking could boost our economy generally?
I said it was 40 billion, wasn't it? The ecosystem. So absolutely it can.
And what does that mean? What all the businesses?
It's all the businesses around open banking that are
Yeah.
supplying those products, like Francesco and others. That it's the true layers of this world that are driving it, because companies like TrueLayer, the unicorns that, as I say, developing through predominantly through fintech. Actually, we are the fintech capital of the world in this. As I say, are driving this because they have a global reach, and you can reach billions of transactions very, very quickly, because they're all small, they're very quick, and you take a little slice of that soon adds up to a lot of money very, very quickly. And if we can steal a march, and we are stealing a march.
How do we stay at the front?
As the UK. Well, this is what I'm saying about making sure that that the structure is there, because I talked earlier about Brazil and other countries that have less of a legacy bureaucracy behind them in terms of the banking and other financial institutions. So if all of those institutions are wanting to be as front-footed as we are, as we're talking about this, then yes, we will continue to steal that march. But if we have a bit of a lag and people and those companies resist to what the future is, what other countries are doing, then we'll deservedly have that stagnant growth that you were talking about. But it's a huge opportunity. As I talked about the unicorns, these are high-impact, high-growth companies that are creating jobs, a lot of really high-quality, well-paid jobs as well. Francesca was talking about you started in 2018, and you I love the way you said hundreds of employees. He didn't have a definite number. He's got that many. He just didn't know how many he's got. That's how successful he is. But I'm joking. But it is the creation of a new generation of people who also then go on, and many of them go on to set up their own businesses as well. They're working within a really dynamic, vibrant business. They get a sense of entrepreneurship and the benefit from that, and they spin out other companies who then create jobs, who then create that wealth themselves in that same vein. So there's plenty going on, and it's not just in London. I've been seeing some of the businesses just across the road here in Manchester. I was up in Leeds last week and Newcastle before that. Out of the 162 unicorns, there are 8 towns and cities that are host to at least 2 unicorns. So this is spread out. Clearly, it still has a London and the Greater South East sort of centre of gravity, but there's plenty going on all around the country.
Does anyone else have a comment on that before we go to the floor?
I think it's important. It's not, yes, it's new companies, it's growth, it's new fintech, but it's also supporting existing companies. Quite a lot of the users that contact me are saying, we're using this not to sell as a product, not to provide to our customers, to improve our decision making, more efficiency, and we're able to be more sustainable and ensure our future by utilising this data.
Fantastic. So let's go for some questions. I'll take 2 at a time. The Sikh chap at the back, and this lady at the front. There we go.
Thank you. I'm Gurcharan, Councillor Gurcharan Vankur from Slough.
Slough, yeah.
Right. I heard everything being said on the panel. Right. So I just could not get hold of the whole idea that how is it a difference Yeah? But we got now. We got digital banking, and transfer money from international money and that. So just go through that once for me, because I want to know how it's more efficient, how it's more trustworthy, how it is more fraud-proof, all these things, please.
Good question. Let's take the second question and then we'll answer them both.
So my name is Francia. I'm here for City Future. I have a question around buy now, pay later firms and the interaction with the younger generation and how this might have an impact on their credit history. Because from what I've seen is that a lot of the banks that are allowing this buy now, pay later, they're advertising this on Instagram, Facebook, and, it just seems very accessible. But then when you look into it and say one of the, 18-year-olds just getting their first card, they are not able to pay, and, there's going to be a lot of fees surrounding that, and potentially that's going to affect their credit. But what are we looking to do in order to protect that younger generation from having a bad credit history? Because now they're going to be just now through open banking and advertising, it becomes so accessible.
Good question. Okay, so we have, what's the difference between what we've got now and the future of open banking, and also buy now, pay later? How can we protect mostly younger people, I think, who use these Klarna sites? Lots of young women, I think, use them for all sorts of clothing. It's always on all the clothing and makeup websites, from what I can see. Who wants to go?
I think that's your contextual advertising, I suspect. But look, the answer to your question about what difference is, it is it. It is actually it. It's not. This isn't something that's coming. This is something that's been happening for the last few years. So when you pick up what I said literally about paying my window cleaner, it's your internet banking is powered by open banking. You don't need to know that. You just need to know you've got your bank account, your internet bank account, so you're able to do the transactions that you were talking about. But the fact is that this phone, whether it's the app for your bank, whether it's something like QuickBooks, whether it's something like a website that's taking faster payments and these kind of things, talks to your bank account, and it's the means of how they talk to the bank account that is open banking. So it's a background mechanism that creates all that opportunity for those businesses to then help you just have a very seamless life.
And what about products like Klarna, the buy now, pay later? I'm not sure where we are with regulation of those kind of products, because on the one hand, it's something that probably divides Conservative MPs, because on the one hand, you don't want to make, don't want only relatively wealthy people to be able to have cheap access to credit, right? And to be able to use these kind of services, but then people can get into, a pickle.
Pickle indeed, absolutely. Look, I mean, to be fair, I'm not up to where we are exactly on the regulation, but what I would say that things like Klarna and PayPal Finance and these kind of things provide very much get the risk that you were talking about, that you're outlining, but they also do provide a more acceptable alternative to payday lending, to some of the other things. When I was a lad, you had, you used to rent your television. People didn't own
Bungalows.
Bungalows, exactly. Those kind of things. You got all the catalogues, and it was it did build up and up and up and up. So we do have to make sure that, as I say, it doesn't slip into that kind of thing and leaving people in debt. But to be fair, I'm not up to where we are on regulation.
I think something open banking can do. It's not here now, and I spoke about the whole ecosystem. So the JROC activity or roadmap is to expand to the whole ecosystem. If data is shared, you can see whether a particular consumer or other has a pattern of activity, be it buy now, pay later, be it gambling, be it other things that are damaging to the individual because they just lose control over what they're doing because it's so quick and easy. The data sits above the specific account, so you can see those patterns. So I see these as models that aren't here today, but open banking will allow that to happen because you're looking at data across all bank accounts.
Could your bank switch you off? So they see that you've got a gambling addiction, so they say,
Yeah.
No, you can't pay any.
Well,
this is where people get worried a bit about the whole, government control.
Big Brother,
Through
yeah.
Big Brother, we're watching every payment you make.
I think switching off is probably a blunt instrument. I think it's about being able to spot where patterns could be detrimental to consumers, and therefore, a process of communication and management that helps support that. I'm not an expert in how you manage that, but the data will enable that decision making and that process to click into place, and it's down to the provider of those services then to manage that accordingly.
I actually think it's a step back from that as well, because if you extend open banking to buy now, pay later, you also got to give a consumer the ability to see all their buy now, pay later in one space. And even before you talk about any other controls and actions, it's actually having that visibility that I've done this here, and it's all coming together, and this is my overall position. That's very hard to do these days.
It is. No, actually, gambling is a really good example of how this can work, because I was the Minister for Gambling Regulation whilst I was at DCMS before we spun out into Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. And the affordability checks that we've talked about and put into the Gambling White Paper had the gambling sector in particular in a real tears. Because at the moment when they were trying to predict what we were going to be doing, they were asking for pay slips, they were asking for this and things just to get into a casino or place a small bet and those kind of things. Really onerous, takes a long time, and it was just putting people off just mild levels of gambling. And so what we've done is that we've put in a source, exactly, not to over-regulate, but I think we've got the balance right, to say that for the vast majority of people, you don't need to worry about it. There will then be a next band of people, and we'll determine the consultations that are happening at the moment as to where the levels lay. That the next level will have frictionless checks. So basically, as long as they know who you are, I talked about digital identity and those kind of things, the people in the casino or the betting shop or online can just do a very simple check, take seconds, you don't know it's happening, you don't have to hand over anything, and then they say, yep, that's fine, you're good to go, I can take your bet. And then there'll be a third level of the most...
Bit nanny state, isn't it?
No, because actually the whole point about gambling is that there are comparatively few, and I use that very carefully, that comparatively few people that are actually subject to gambling harm. But when it happens, boy, does it happen. The amount of people whose houses are destroyed, they commit, the suicides. When you've met the kind of people that I met who were advocating for gambling regulation, they wanted me to go way, way further. And I tell you what, I defy you to listen to their stories and come out without, a heart to actually say, we need to do something, but we need to do it proportionately. I think that's the key thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. People lose absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And we're already piloting some of
Come
that.
to you in a moment. Pardon, what did you say?
We're already piloting some of that. So things like combining an age verification check with a payment and making that seamless to the customer as part of the same journey is something we're piloting.
Well, can we make it that, teenagers can't buy machetes online? That might be nice.
That would be good.
That'd be good. Sorry. Francesco.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, open banking is, I think, one of those technology that helps to get the balance right, whether it's buy now, pay later or gambling, for instance, for the data share, it's super important to, from one side on board customer faster, remove friction, because we all want every service to be accessible, but on the other side, give the critical data to make those decisions to whether you can access this service or not, and avoid fraudulent behaviors, people that will forge things in order to access the service, right? And this is already working. This is not like a future we want. This is already working. Like the buy now, pay laters, even like the gambling websites, are all using open banking and other technologies that are part of this range of the digital infrastructure to make those determinations. And so I think that, as everything, there are potential harms, but also a lot of pros. And if you look at buy now, pay later, the CEO of Klarna often says look at the outcome, right? By the numbers. And I think if you look at the numbers, well, I would argue that is a safer, cheaper, more sustainable form of credit versus, for instance, some of the predatory lending, services that you were mentioning about. So I think you need to take a balanced view on the entire thing and just understand technology streamline a bunch of those operations, but on the other side, we should use technology to control and be fine-grained onto those use cases that are potentially harmful and are potentially problematic for themselves and society as a whole.
Any more questions? Lady at the front and this chap at the back there.
Thank you. My name's Ali Griffiths. I'm a former strategy director of Innovate Finance and have long been excited about the opportunities in open banking. But the question I've got is around the commercial model, particularly for aggregators of data for consumers. One of the earliest aggregators is Money Dashboard. And I was really disappointed to get an email from them today saying that they're closing at the end of this month because they haven't been able to make the commercial model work. And I was just really interested in hearing your views on why that might have been and what we can do to encourage a commercial model that works for not just B2B but consumers as well.
Happy to take that. I mean, Money Dashboard, I know like the co-founder very well, Gavin, and all the crew there. They were really instrumental to develop open banking standards. But I believe that like the idea per se is really has merit. Like the idea of like you look at all your bank accounts, you understand your finances, you can budget appropriately. The question is like those are a bunch of features that in my view they do belongs into other digital dashboards, whether it's a bank, whether it's a wallet, whether it's a maybe, I don't know, now it will be an age of like personal, AI and whatever, right? Like, but the idea is that this is a bunch of features that are very useful, but they will be, and they are getting embedded into other larger business model that belongs to maybe banking, for example, or investment. And so just to make a couple of examples, so for one Money Dashboard that, go out of business or whatever, like they have to terminate the service, there are tons of like the Plum Cheap, which are, for instance, two robo-advisors that will look at the spending pattern, give you suggestion how to improve your finances, and also invest your money in the best yielding accounts, in the best investment opportunities. The Revolut and the Monzo, which are using open banking to give you this sort of like integrated dashboard within their app, but they're also banks, right? So they will make money in other ways. And so the danger of like the Money Dashboard kind of business model is that you start collecting all this data, and then like you're tempted to resell this data or do something with this data that goes above and beyond. And I don't think that this is necessarily where the industry should go. We need to embed all those functionalities into, let's say, maybe some more boring and old business models, but they exist and they have large scale and they can really provide a lot of value out of consumers. So I would say long live to Money Dashboard, but like just like in a broader setting.
Understood? Excellent. Let's get the second question over there.
Thank you. Samuel Coates, I'm a former Treasury SPAD and actually a Conservative Home alumnus from back in the day. I just want to come back to what Paul was saying. So, the conversation about these sort of things often does revolve around the very public-facing consumer stuff and the Revoluts and the Monzos that were just mentioned. But the potential for SMEs for productivity and efficiency and late payments and all those sort of issues is really important, I think, to the economy. I'm sort of on the front line of this at the moment with a startup called Yavrio, which uses a service like Francesco's to plug into banks, to plug into ERPs, which the kind of software that Paul mentioned, so your accounting software. And we're finding it a really conservative space, actually, in a bad small c way, because the big banks are actually quite reluctant to give us the data and the access and the support that we want to empower the businesses to use the data in that way. So I just wanted to, that's things like historical data and bulk transactions and that kind of thing. So I was interested if the panel would recognise that characterisation, that the sort of the business B2B less sexy side is sort of dragging its feet a little bit, and whether, given banks might not necessarily see a commercial incentive in releasing that data, whether there's any appetite from government to sort of nudge that along a bit in the next year or so.
Would you like to take this?
Probably NatWest, I would have thought.
Well, we are the largest business bank in the UK, so maybe, yeah. I'm not here to talk about that, so I can't comment. But on the business space, there has to be, either you have government mandate or there has to be some commercial incentive to share more data than beyond what we're sharing at the moment. Don't get me wrong, open banking was a huge investment to deliver, and it took the best part of 4 years to deliver. Depending on the information that's required, some of it is readily available, some of it actually is in multiple kind of platforms and is quite challenging to go and get. So there is going to be a cost to that. And I actually feel in this kind of business space, we actually need to look at, is there a commercial model around can you share more data on a kind of, not an investment cost basis, but a running cost basis, so cost recovery. And also how can we actually kind of bring in other data sources? Because I think in the business space, it's the combination of bank data with other data sources that makes it a really powerful tool for a business owner.
And I think it's a sign of the even though it's taken 4 years and even though the legislation came in 6 years ago, it's an immature market, and that's what we really need to work on now. And so I believe that data should be shared, but I also believe that it has to make sense. We still don't have a funding model for open banking, and that's part of the JROC plan, which is being worked on right now, and the Financial Conduct Authority are in charge of that and delivering that. So we have an economic model that means that open banking is sustainable, that all participants pay into the ecosystem in a fair and equitable way, and that we have a sustainable opportunity. And for banks and for TPPs and for other stakeholder groups, that it makes sense, but that there is an incentive, if not mandated, to share data. So I would like to see that, but to Stephen's point, there has to be an economic model here or a funding model that works for all. We don't have that yet, and we need to have that. It's not sustainable for 9 banks to be funding this all. That is wrong, it's unfair, but it's what was needed to get this off the ground. So that funding model should be, becoming very clear very soon, and then I think we can start to look at making sure that all the data that's needed is shared in an equitable way.
Sam, you asked if there's and you asked if there's an appetite for government to legislate. I think, look, what we tend to do, what Conservative government always tends to do, is look at what we can do in agreement, what we can do to have a market-driven model. Interesting, you were talking about the rents versus mortgages, because I remember answering a debate when I was Consumer Minister about the exact thing. There was a petition doing the rounds on the House of Commons petition site saying that it should be mandated to take in rent prices. It was Lord Bird was doing some work on it. And actually what I got out of Steve Barclay, who was then Chief Secretary of the Treasury, I think it's about 350 grand, to have as a sort of market-driven, to find a market-driven solution. And so you look at that first, and then, as in the case with open banking, if we need to, then we move to legislation. But you use legislation as a last resort rather than the first resort. I think that's a key Conservative philosophy.
Great. I think we've got time for maybe 1 or 2 questions if we're quick. At the front.
Not about Nigel Farage.
Yeah, not about Farage. And who's like this chap, because he's smiling. Hang on, no.
Okay.
Take this one and then, yeah.
So, how can you deal with sort of malign state or non-state actors putting up the money? Say the mafia or the Russians put up 200 million and gave it to Francesco, and get all this data on vulnerable people or people we can exploit. How can you guard against those kind of malign forces? Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, does the UK government subsidise or guarantee people's money, like a 50% or 25% money back guarantee if they invest in tech in the UK? Is that scheme still going?
Hold that thought, panel. And second question?
Sure. Right, okay, so the second question is talking about big data, because obviously this is going to generate a tremendous amount of potential data pool, which is collective, and that collective data could be mined. And it has actually quite a financial resource, which is a very valuable resource. And that would obviously mitigate the actual cost of the open banking platform, in answer to what you just said earlier about banks bearing this cost. The other point on security, with this interchange of data, how will people know that the security ultimately is going to be in favor of the actual consumer, which is obviously the most important thing?
Thank you very much. Who would like to take what? The idea of hostile states intervening.
I mean, happy to take the first bit, right? No, I mean, like, I just want to make sure that we get the model right. Like, it's not that everyone can show up and connect to, have access to all this data and like, it's not how it works. The way it works is that you go through a registration and authorization process with the FCA, and you're highly regulated to do that. That means having like check balances, governance, security, audits, oversight, not differently than a bank, right? And so this is a model that has been thought through from the very beginning of where, like, how the data moves, who receives this data, who funnels this data, how we can like check that the whole value chain remains in a safe and sound kind of configuration, right? Now, of course, like, what does it mean? It means that you can always have some sort of like black swan event, like, but there are people on the hooks, right? So in your case, like, I would be personally very much on the hook for that, as long with all the other board of directors and chief compliance officers and people, the regulators that are constantly in touch with us to understand like how this works and what we do with the data, flow of payments and everything we do, right? Yeah. So I think it's a fairly sound model.
Right, we've got less than 2 minutes, so I'll allow you to do your closing remarks while picking up on those final questions there, Marion.
Oh, I'm confused.
Where are you going to go?
Fine.
It doesn't have to be closing remarks, just an answer to whichever. So we had
remind me.
Hostile states. We also had talk of a UK government scheme, a subsidy scheme.
I cover that. EIS and SCIS, and yes, it does still exist, and in fact we've expanded it. So it's something that startups love, investors love, and so we recognise that.
And a concern about a big data pool that is a collective, and it may be mined, a valuable resource. That, I'm not exactly sure what your question was.
By use of that data. So this is a funding model for open banking, which might be
I'll sort of cover off the first point or try to in closing comments as well. It's not a big pool of data that sits there and people dip into what they want to. It's transactional, so it's around a specific event or specific transaction or requirements of a specific model that you can pull the data from the bank for that particular application. It's not a big pool that sits there that could be mined or hacked and therefore exploited. And I think that what we're seeing, and I know you'll come in here, Stephen, is that there are commercial models now that are supporting the use of open data, notwithstanding the need for that economic model. And so I'm talking about that sort of central infrastructure and the ability to make sure that's sustainable and appropriately funded. In addition to that, we'll see the true layers and other innovators and the banks be able to generate strong business cases to support and grow the use of open data.
Stephen?
And I think that's quite key. So you as a consumer, you consent to specific data being shared. So you're not consenting to your whole data lake being moved across. So there is some controls in there. And when you come as a firm to mine that data, depending on what consent you've got and what the data legislation is, your ability to mine that data is also limited, unless you've gone and signed global terms and conditions and asked for everything.
Right, well, I think that's all we've got time for, unless there's anything anyone would like to add very, very quickly.
No, I just think it's well for that. I mean, look, the whole point about hacking it, you either make it eliminate it, or you actually make it so expensive and so difficult to do. And exactly what Stephen was saying, it is expensive. It is until we get to quantum computing and those kind of things, which is a little way away. But look, this is a really it is an exciting opportunity for the UK. It is happening now. We've got to stay at the forefront of it because it's good for consumers. It's good for the UK economy with the businesses that are making the most of it. And it's so important that we work with these guys, that we expand it to other parts of our economy as well, open finance, open data, open everything, so that we can really liberate our markets and become a really high growth country once again.
Well, there you go. It's nice to be number one at something.
Yay.
Yes, excellent. Thank you very much for my very informative and entertaining panel. Marion King, Stephen Wright,